Ray Zimmerman, Chattanooga poet, reading from my new collection, Healing and Conflict. The poem is titled The Wendigo's Way, written after reading Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The Wendigo is born in the hunger moon, a cautionary tale of hard times and short supplies. Born of the time when frost paints the ground, he sees only shortage, seeks to seize what he wants from others. More than that, he is a cannibal. He glowers across a clearing and gives chase as you dash away. Forget your dignity, run. Only the bravest soul hunts Wendigo. No chain can hold him. His hair, a static electric shock. No fawn will gambol in his woods. Wendigo ate his own lips in lust for human flesh, but he was once a man. Think on that when you wish for just a little more. Thank you.
In your own words, who are you? Who wants to go first?
I thought that Ray would go first so that he had an opportunity.
I'm an old guy who has spent a lot of time in the outdoors and loves nature and has worked as a park ranger and loves to write about it. And nature is my muse.
I am just another person who's trying to make it to the other side of whatever this thing is that I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I'm really just a person who's doing all the things that get thrown at me. So lately, that means that I have 5 children. And I'm okay with that. And I am a person who loves poetry and music and politics and all of the things that are going on in my life. But I don't really know who I am. I think that I'm still discovering that.
How did you discover poetry?
I was part of a writer group, and I was writing prose. I was writing nonfiction, a lot of journalistic stuff, and I just decided to visit the poetry critique group one time and see what they were about, and I started writing poetry.
And you're a lifer ever since?
Yep, still write prose, but I write poetry too now.
How about you?
When I was a little kid, I really liked Tom and Jerry, like back in the late 90s. And there was always a scene, and maybe it was in multiple episodes, where like he's pretty sure that he's gonna die. Either he's committing suicide or he's just in general dying, which is probably not great for like a TV show that a 4-year-old would watch, but whatever. And I would see him like writing a letter. He would write his, I guess, his suicide note. And when you look at the paper, it's just squiggles on a page. But I thought that that was brilliant. So when I was 4, I would just get lined notebook paper and then just do the exact same thing. I would just squiggle on the page because I really, really loved writing, except I just didn't know how to do it. And I think that that really developed into me loving writing and poetry and all of it. Because it's not just the poetry, it's also just the way that it feels when your pen is in your hand and you're just scratching it all out on paper. And so that's really how I discovered poetry and writing, from a Tom and Jerry suicide note.
What was the moment you decided that you could be a poet?
I haven't really decided that I could be a poet. I mean, I'm definitely a person who writes, and kind of like what Ray said about, you know, there was a pivotal moment when he decided that he could be a poet. And for me, that moment hasn't really come. And I think that it's just because I don't spend nearly as much of my time writing poetry as I'd like to. If I could really devote myself to writing the way that I wanted to and all of these other things in my life didn't get all of my attention, I might be able to call myself a poet, but I haven't really decided that I am one yet. I'm waiting for the moment when it just happens.
I was a person who wrote poetry and prose for a long time. I think the moment I discovered I was a poet was when I made my first trip to Nashville for the Southern Festival of Books in 2007, because I had won an award in a poetry contest and been invited to read my poem in front of an audience there. The award was from the Tennessee Writers Alliance, and the award wasn't what made me a poet, though. It was the performance. I was 10 days after having had open heart surgery, so I was groggy, pain medicated, probably still had anesthetic in my system. Luckily, I didn't try to drive myself up there. Someone took me there, and just standing in front of that audience, realizing that they were focused on my voice, and I am a voice ever since then. So I had written a lot of poetry before that time, but my persona as a poet solidified in that one moment.
How large of a role would you say that your own identities play in your work?
From day to day, it really changes. Some days I am writing the poem. Some days I am a conduit through which the poem arrives. The best poetry is probably the latter, when I'm the conduit through which the poem arrives. You'll hear poets talk about what I want and what the poem wants. And that's a struggle while you're writing. And you wonder if the poem is writing you. And I once made that comment that, the question being, what do you want versus what does the poem want? And some person said, isn't that the same thing? And I thought, that person is not a poet. Sorry.
I definitely think that I come out of my poetry as much as it comes out of me. I mostly write about myself and my mother because those are the only things I really know. So if I'm writing about something, then it's something that's going on in my life and something that's affecting my life, whether it be something political or a love poem or a letter to all the people who need to hear me say something to them. But my life definitely plays a big part in the poetry that I write.
What is it like to be a poet in Chattanooga in 2018?
I think Chattanooga has a lot to offer for artists. It really does. Chattanooga is a city that's filled with art in the alleyways, in the parks, and everywhere. Chattanooga also feels like it all has become way too big, way too quickly. Recently the city's made a lot of improvements. A lot of things that just make the city a lot prettier. And I think that that's great. I think that there's focus that needs to go other places too. And I worry that because Chattanooga, was voted third best city and has a lot of tourism and has a lot of really, really rich people moving into the city all the time, I feel like things like that have started to taint a lot of what we had going on before. It doesn't really feel like you can just be a person creating art and enjoying yourself. You either need to be really serious or you need to just take a couple steps back until you are really serious.
It is challenging because there are a lot of good poets, and sometimes you have to wonder, am I good enough? And there's a lot of great art here. But the real challenge is that the message may not be one that the audience wants to hear. And part of the duty of an artist is to sometimes make people feel uncomfortable. Usually you know that that's happening if they laugh. But every once in a while I will write a poem departing from my nature poet persona, where I have addressed the socioeconomic state of the world, or recuperation from illness, or heaven help us, a love poem, and somebody will give me that line. You should stick to nature poetry. And I have to use that inflection, because usually the people who say that are either uncomfortable or angry or something. They just weren't expecting that. And I didn't have a response for a long time, but I finally wrote an essay that responds to that. It's titled Speaking of Nature. And I point out that nature is not what you expect. Kali, the patron goddess of Calcutta, is a nature goddess. She rules the typhoon, the earthquake, and the tidal wave. She personifies the destructive aspects of nature. And the planet Venus appears for 9 months at a time and hence became a fertility goddess. And I talk about, whales going to the Pacific coast of Baja, which is their calving ground and their mating ground. And when the gray whales start mating, it's essentially an orgy. You couldn't know the parentage of a whale calf unless you did genetic testing. And I said, well, nature isn't what you think it is. It's not nice flowers over there. I mean, it is, but there's more to it than that. And so putting limits on me as a nature poet is the same as putting limits on nature, and nature is unlimited. People ask if, the Earth is going to survive climate change and other environmental disasters that are coming. And my answer is the Earth will be fine. It's whether or not we're going to be around. And I've been known to use the line, the cockroaches shall inherit the earth. So sometimes I am uncomfortable bringing the message, but I have to. It's my obligation. What's your obligation?
I already answered the question.
Oh.
What is my obligation? To show up at home and go to work and exist somewhere around?
As a poet, to speak out, which you do.
I think it's to send my message. Once I figure out what it is.
I want to chime off with it, actually. What are some of the biggest things you've learned about yourselves and your work since you've been active as poets?
I have learned that I care about a lot of things. I've learned that I care about too many things. I'm sure that I've learned that I can be just a little bit childish. And I've definitely learned what I think I want to do with the time that I have to live my life, and the things that I want to give to the rest of the world, and the messages that I want to spread. And I've also learned about how much I appreciate my mother. And that sounds cheesy and corny, but I mean, I've realized through writing poetry and reading poetry how important the family unit is, especially for Mexicans. And I never really appreciated my family unit or all of the sacrifices that my mom made just so that I could be where I am, until I started really going for it.
I've learned that I can be playful at times. I've learned that I can be very serious and very angry at times. I've learned that there is more to my persona than I imagined. And sometimes I've learned that I just need to stop and listen to other poets. I'm doing that right now.
What are you most proud of in your lives as poets?
I think what I'm most proud of is my resilience. I think that I've realized through poetry that there's a lot that I've been able to touch both directly and indirectly in my life. And I think that just being able to have gotten to where I am is enough to be proud of. I mean, we're human beings and there's no timeline for success. And based on where I am in my life, I think that I have at least something to be proud of in that I've been able to do a lot in a short amount of time, or a lot comparatively.
I think I'm most proud of the times that I have published other poets and put on programs that have featured other poets. Yeah, I was going to hold up my new book, which I'll hold it up, but I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of what I've published. But I used to do a monthly program in St. Elmo, New Voices, and the cast was different every time. You participated in it. A number of other local poets participated in it. And it was a showcase to bring more attention to those poets. Some of them had plenty of attention already, but mostly it was just to feature and showcase other poets. And although I am very proud of my own work, I'm most proud of the times when I have done something that has brought other artists to the public's eye.
Dear Ryan, despite all the right-wing rhetoric and in all of your brokenness, I have always loved you. Dear Richard, watching a political documentary to prepare for a political science test was the perfect date. Too bad I was too busy focusing on when it would be the right time to kiss you instead of paying attention to the movie I got to see on that test. Dear Brian, there's a reason I keep a lock on my phone now. Dear Jason, I don't blame you for saying no to coffee. I wouldn't want to go out on a date with me either. Dear John, I'm not sorry I stole your dog. I'm sorry I let him stay with you that long. Dear Barefoot John, you're right. You're too old. I'm too crazy. We're better off platonic. Dear Jonathan, I only asked you out on a date so you would stop asking me to have sex with you. It worked. Dear Josh, your brother was better. Dear Caleb, not that much better. I thought that I might have loved you, but you didn't feel the same way. Dear Roddy, all I wanted was to borrow your political science notes. Can we not make this into something sexual? Dear James, I loved you from the first day. You never needed a boat. Dear Darren, I still can't tell if it's just coffee. Dear Brett, you're not as fun when I'm not on mushrooms. Maybe just lose my number. Dear Nick, I liked you. Easy. Dear Guillermo, I loved you like I knew I'd never see you again. That bullet broke us both, but I still light a candle every year on the anniversary of your death, and you will be beautiful forever. Dear Chip, we were young, we were stupid, but unfortunately for you, some things never change. Dear Ray, you should have known better. Dear Mr. Avila, I thought I was in love with you every day my sophomore year of high school. I'm sorry that got you fired. Dear Patrick, you're crazy, I'm crazy, and you let your dog shit on my floor and you didn't clean it up. Dear DJ, I still have your grandmother's ring. If you had allowed me to give it back to you, maybe you would have had something with which to propose to your girlfriend. By the way, congratulations. Dear Ryan, I will always love you. Dear Jay, you should be in jail, but it's been 10 years. Maybe you are. Dear Brody, you are tall, you are cute, but when you open your mouth to speak, none of those things matter. Consider this fact. Dear Felipe, I'm not her, and I don't want to be. Dear Aaron, you're the reason every shoe is a running shoe. Dear David, you are the reason for the pepper spray and the sleeping pills and why I don't wear makeup anymore. I hope you run fast because we'll see each other again and it's not going to be me next time. Dear Mitchell, gross. Dear Jeff, I'm sorry. We could be living together in Houston right now, writing poetry and stand-up comedy, but while you were daydreaming and convinced that we were a thing, I had no idea we were even a thing. Dear Russell, telling me how good the blowjob was is not considered a compliment. There's a reason we don't speak anymore. Dear Mother, I am still your decent daughter. Dear Kepler, you're the one that taught me that being a good person is a hell of a lot more about how you treat people than how many have been in your pants. Dear Father, you could take a lesson from that. Dear boys, you can call me a slut, but your unsolicited dick pics are just the plastic soda bottle common clutter littering the bare, dirty floor of my inbox. But this isn't about you or the other girls you harass. It's about me. And dear me, stop selling yourself short and coming up broke. Stop forgetting to love yourself first, and please, 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 stop forgetting your worth.